So we're going to keep the show moving right along. We're going to jump into our next speaker, and he is Max Webster. Max Webster is a junior at Yale College, majoring in political science with a focus on environmental law and politics. His interest in the plight of climate refugees was spurred by his experience with Hurricane Katrina, when he and his family were forced to relocate from their home on the Mississippi Gulf Coast to Nashville, Tennessee, where he attended Montgomery Bell Academy for high school. Webster is committed to finding safety and security of basic human rights for an estimate of 200 million plus climate refugees. So please welcome Max Webster.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be back, and hope I can give you guys an impactful message here today. So in 2005, as you just heard, my family and I were displaced from New Orleans and the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Now, it's difficult for people to wrap their minds around what this means. One day, you're sitting there with your family, eating at your table, everything is normal, everyone's around you. The next day, in the blink of an eye, you leave, and everything's gone. Your community, every material good, everything that you know is gone. Many people you'll never see again for your entire lives as people are spread all over the country. But this is not a unique event. This is literally just the tip of the iceberg. Last year, as we heard Mayor Dean talk about, Nashville suffered from its own great natural disaster when large parts of the city were underwater and people were displaced internally here as well. All over the world. Last year alone, we saw Poland, Australia, and particularly the floods in Pakistan, where tremendous numbers of people lost their lives or their communities. Now, what I want to show you guys here today is that this is a problem that is just beginning and is just going to get severely and much worse in the coming years. Although it's difficult to draw the scientific link between climate change and any individual extreme weather event, the science is very clear that in the coming years, we're only going to see more and more extreme weather events and this kind of severity displacing more and more individuals. It's even more clear when you look at climate processes that are slow onset. Think about rising sea levels. Now, this right here is a woman, Ursula Rakova, and she's a part of the Carteret Islands. Now, the Carteret Islands, the nation of Palau, the Maldives, all of these areas of the South Pacific are currently literally going underwater. They're being submerged. As sea levels continue to rise, she is losing her community. And not only her own community, but she has nowhere to go like we did here in the United States. She has no one to speak for her and her community, no one to speak for her language, her indigenous culture. Neither does this fisherman here in Tuvalu. And what I want to do today is bring the argument down to a basic level of human rights. Now, so far in the United States, we always get so caught up in politics about, climate change being an issue of right or left or arguing over some scientific intricacies, which most people don't understand. But the message I want to give you is very clear. There is no denying that millions of people are currently being affected and are currently losing their homes and lives. In the future, hundreds of millions of people will suffer from what could be the greatest human rights travesty in the history of mankind if we don't take some action to help. So I want to talk a little bit about a few of the scenarios. I've sort of given you the most visceral image of a sinking island, literally going underwater, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. You look at agricultural failure, where the changes in access to fresh water and the salinity of the water, and people are going to have to leave their homes because they can no longer farm there, because they can no longer find fresh water, because they can no longer provide for their families. And what this means is that they're going to be leaving, and they're going to be going into areas that are already extremely impoverished and already at the brink of danger as it stands. And this is only going to exacerbate the problem. When you look at where most of these hundreds of millions of refugees are focused, it's in areas that are already below the extreme poverty line, areas of sub-Saharan Africa, areas of Southeast Asia like Bangladesh or Pakistan or India. And what's going to happen is when these people go into the cities, when they're internally displaced, as their lands continue to erode, they're going to be rushing into places that are already rife with disease, hunger, violence, pestilence. And we're only going to see that continue to build if we don't do something to control the problem before it happens. So this, therefore, boils down to a question of justice and a question of human rights. If you believe that we have had a large role to play in climate change, if you believe the emissions from the developed world are causing much of this damage, then we have a responsibility to help the people that we've hurt. But even if you don't believe that we have caused this problem or that we are directly culpable, we still have an obligation to help. Because hundreds of millions of people are going to be left without anything. And speaking as someone who in this country lost all of their material possessions overnight, I can tell you how horrible it was here in the United States. Imagine for people who can't already provide food on the table. Any excess resources that we have, we're privileged to have, but we have to take care of these people. And the final thing is, it's also an issue of self-interest, national security. The Department of Defense and Pentagon have spent tremendous amounts of money researching how exactly this is going to spill into climate wars. If we don't look into how we're going to take care of people today, where they're going to go, how they're going to be displaced, then they're going to have to force their way into somewhere to take care of themselves as a measure of last resort. And frankly, that's not going to be good for anyone. Right now, there are no international legal protections for these people. The terms environmental refugee or climate refugee aren't recognized, and there's no treaties, no doctrines, no conventions, no frameworks, no protocols, nothing to answer how we're going to deal with these people, how we're going to help them. We, therefore, have a role to play. Speaking at a youth event like this, I'm so blessed, I'm so honored, because I think this is the message that I want our youth around the world to hear today. We live in an area, we live in a city, Nashville, in a country of the United States. We are blessed to have so much, so many resources, so many opportunities. But with that great privilege comes great responsibility. As our generation take up the reins of power locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, we have something we need to step up to. Hundreds of millions of people around the world are going to be left without a voice, and we can provide that voice for them. I'm taking the early steps here today to launch a campaign to get out the message, the plight of these people, and try and get islanders like Ursula Rakova to be able to speak. But we all have a role to play in this. We all have a role to educate ourselves and tell other people about these plight. Because if we don't, they'll have nowhere to go. Thank you so much.